Amidst the chaos of the Battle of Bosworth, King Richard III prepares for the charge. He rallies his personal bodyguard, adjusting his armor and tightening his grip on his lance. With a determined look, he leads his loyal companions, their horses galloping across the battlefield. Richard's personal banner, displaying a white wild boar, flutters in the wind. They surge forward, closing the distance to Henry Tudor, the challenger of the English throne. Tension hangs in the air as Richard's charge reaches its climax. The fate of the battle hinges on this pivotal moment, as Richard and his companions draw nearer, ready to engage. In the tumultuous 15th century, England found itself torn asunder by bitter conflict between the houses of York and Lancaster, known as the Wars of the Roses. After the Yorkists emerged victorious in 1471, Edward IV held the kingdom in his grip. Meanwhile, the Tudor family, with their distant ties to the Lancastrians, faced a precarious situation. Henry Tudor, the last Lancastrian noble with royal blood, had a weak claim to the throne. Seeking refuge, Henry and his mother found themselves in the custody of the Duke of Brittany, who saw value in their presence. Henry's arrival in Brittany marked the merging of Tudor family aspirations with French politics. The Duke of Brittany, and later the King of France, recognized the importance of safeguarding Henry Tudor's claim to the English throne. When Edward IV passed away in 1483, his young son, Edward V, ascended the throne, but a power struggle erupted within the royal council. In this pivotal moment, a captivating and divisive character stepped onto the stage of English history, making his bid for the crown. His name was Richard, Duke of Gloucester, and brother of Edward IV, who seized the opportunity to become the protector and swiftly took the young king into custody. Richard was a formidable warrior and military strategist, known for his bravery and victories at battles such as Tewkesbury and Barnet. But despite his reputation, Richard's actions stirred controversy as he executed prominent Woodville members, accusing them of treason. He then declared the marriage between Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville invalid, rendering their children illegitimate and claiming the throne for himself as Richard III. The two princes, confined in the Tower of London, vanished from public view, their fates shrouded in mystery. Discontent simmered beneath Richard's rule, and whispers of rebellion began to circulate. In 1483, a conspiracy led by the Tudors aimed to overthrow Richard and promote Henry as a candidate for the throne broke out in open rebellion. However, the plot was foiled by bad timing, treacherous weather, allowing Richard to crush the uprising. The surviving rebels sought refuge in Brittany, openly backing Henry Tudor's claim. To unite the warring houses of York and Lancaster, Henry pledged to marry Edward IV's daughter, Elizabeth of York. Richard attempted to capture Henry, but both the Duke of Brittany and later the King of France refused to surrender him. Under the watchful eye of the French court, the Tudors found sanctuary, their presence serving as strategic pawns to safeguard against Richard's England meddling in French ambitions to annex Brittany. In 1485, the death of Richard's wife fueled rumors that he planned to marry his niece. The potential loss of Elizabeth's hand in marriage posed a grave threat to Henry Tudor's fragile alliance between Lancastrians and Edward IV's loyalists. Aware of the stakes, Henry prepared to embark on a daring endeavour against Richard. Recognizing the strategic importance of his mission, the French court, eager to destabilize Richard's England, provided crucial support. Henry enlisted the aid of battle-hardened mercenaries who joined his contingent of loyal exiles. With his resolve unwavering, but lacking any form of military experience, Henry set sail from Harfleur on the fateful day, the 1st of August 1485. Henry's ships eventually landed in Wales without incident. As Henry Tudor set foot on the shore, he humbly knelt on the sand, his voice carrying the solemn words of the psalm, "Judge me, O Lord, and decide my fate." Following their leader's example, his army disembarked, swiftly establishing a secure position on the beach. However, the local reception was lukewarm, and only a few Welshmen initially joined his army. Nonetheless, Welsh bards celebrated his arrival as a true prince bringing glory to their land. As Henry advanced, Richard's lieutenant in South Wales along with 2 officers failed to oppose him, and instead joined Henry's ranks. In the early stages of the campaign, the most significant defector was the lieutenant of West Wales, appointed by Richard. Together, they gathered a force of Welshmen, estimated at 500 to 2,000. They made their way through the countryside. By mid-August, Henry and his army had crossed the English border. In the shadow of Henry's impending invasion, Richard's kingdom raised itself, his loyal lords on high alert. The news of Henry's long-awaited landing finally reached Richard. On the 16th of August, Richard's most faithful ally, the Duke of Norfolk, led the Yorkist army to converge in Leicester, the designated assembly point. Simultaneously, the Duke of Northumberland, commanding the northern reaches of the realm, had already rallied his forces en route to Leicester. Meanwhile, though Henry's ultimate destination was London, he opted for a more meandering path. His forces turned eastward, gathering English allies and even persuading some disillusioned souls from Richard's ranks to join his cause. Despite the bolstering of his army since their landing, Henry remained greatly outnumbered by Richard's forces. Recognizing the need to reinforce his ranks, he deliberately slowed his progress, gathering more supporters along the way. Before Henry's arrival in England, he had forged a strategic alliance with the influential Stanley family, whose role in the conflict would prove to be wildly unpredictable. Upon hearing news of Henry's landing, the Stanleys swiftly mobilized their forces, positioning themselves ahead of Henry's march through the English countryside. However, despite Lord Stanley's marriage to Henry's mother, his allegiance remained opportunistic and ambiguous. His actions held the power to sway the outcome and determine the conflict's ultimate fate. On the 21st of August, the Stanleys set up camp on the slopes of a hill north of Danlington, while Henry's army settled at White Moors, northwest of their position. Meanwhile, on the 20th of August, Richard marched from Nottingham to Leicester, where he met with Norfolk. The Duke of Northumberland's arrival the following day marked the completion of the Royal Army's assembly. With their focus firmly on intercepting Henry, Richard's forces pushed westward and strategically chose to come on Ambion Hill near Bosworth. The stage was now set for a monumental clash, the destiny of the crown hanging in the balance. The two armies prepared themselves for a decisive struggle that would shape the future of the realm. At dawn on August 22nd, 1485, the two armies commenced their deployment for battle. However, recent archaeological findings have shattered our preconceptions about the battlefield's location. It was not the renowned Ambion Hill that hosted this decisive clash, but a spot 3.2 kilometers southwest of its assumed position. The Yorkist army, its exact numbers still uncertain, positioned themselves on the commanding hilltop. Estimates varied, suggesting a force ranging from 7,500 to 12,000 men. Along the ridgeline stretching from northeast to southwest, the Yorkist deployment took shape. The right flank, battle-hardened spearmen at the Norfolk's command formed a defensive barrier. around artillery pieces and a contingent of 1,200 archers. Richard himself led the centre, consisting of 3,000 infantry. Northumberland assumed responsibility for guarding the left flank, marshalling around 4,000 men, some likely mounted. From their advantageous position atop the hill, Richard and his commanders surveyed the field. There stood the Stanleys, their substantial force of 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers, strategically positioned on and around the southern hill. To the southwest, Henry's army awaited. Henry Tudor's forces, a composite of exiles, mercenaries, recruits and deserters, assumed their positions. Estimates placed Henry's troops between 5,000 and 8,000 men, bolstered by recent reinforcements from Wales. Recognizing his own limited military expertise, Henry entrusted the command of his army to the capable veteran, the Earl of Oxford. As the impending battle approached, Henry positioned himself at the rear, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. Surveying the sprawling site of Richard's forces spread out along the ridgeline, Oxford made a fateful decision. Departing from tradition, he chose to keep his troops united instead of dividing them into the customary vanguard, center and rearguard formations. Fearing that his men would be swallowed by the chaos of battle, Oxford issued a strict directive. No soldier was to stray more than 10 feet from their respective banners. This tactic aimed to maintain cohesion and prevent individual units from becoming isolated. The soldiers adhered to Oxford's orders, clustering together to form an imposing mass as they advanced against Richard's position. As Henry's forces drew closer to the royal army, its composition became clearer. Rows of soldiers lined the horizon, armed and ready. Across a section of the battlefield, the marshland added an additional challenge to the impending clash. Closing the distance to approximately 1,300 meters, a sudden eruption of smoke, followed by thunderous reverberations, signaled the beginning of hostilities. The first volleys unleashed solid projectiles, hurtling toward Oxford's division. Many shots rebounded with devastating force, tearing through ranks without regard for their protective armor worn by fortunate soldiers. Limbs were severed as these projectiles passed through, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. As the division pressed forward, additional cannons joined their relentless onslaught, their thunderous roars resonating across the battlefield. With finesse, the insurgent division deftly shifted its position, moving to the left while using the marshland as a natural barrier on their right flank. As they continued their march, Oxford's soldiers gradually veered toward the right side of Norfolk's division, aiming to encircle their adversary. Meanwhile, the Royal Artillery adjusted their positions to maintain their barrage for as long as possible. The archers under Norfolk's command launched arrows toward the rebel lines, receiving a response from Oxford's division. The ranks remained tightly knit, strategically organizing themselves to repel any enemy encroachment. What followed was a brutal clash of late medieval infantry. During this preliminary phase, the confrontation primarily unfolded in close-quarter combat, with billhooks, halberds, and poleaxes being the chosen weapons. Billhooks, with their sharp-edged blades, proved effective in skilled hands, inflicting significant injuries. Halberds, with their versatile design, combining axe-like blades and pointed spikes, delivered forceful blows capable of impacting armor and crushing bones. Meanwhile, the poleaxes, featuring pointed and jagged spikes, effectively pierced defenses, leaving distinct marks in the bodies of armored combatants. In the relentless confrontation, both factions exhibited unwavering determination, refusing to give ground as they continuously exchanged strikes. Following Oxford's tactical decision, his forces initiated a strategic withdrawal, leading to a temporary halt in the intense combat. Some speculate that this maneuver was a deliberate feigned retreat, aimed at luring Norfolk's troops into a vulnerable position. However, if it was a ruse, it failed to entice the enemy out, as they remained steadfast in their positions. After a brief respite, Oxford quickly reorganized his forces, aiming to create a rift and disrupt their cohesion. With renewed vigor, his troops surged forward once again, resuming their relentless charge. Amidst the intense clash between the vanguards, Norfolk's forces began to falter, gradually yielding ground. It became evident that Oxford's men displayed greater resolve in the ensuing close-quarter combat, firmly holding their position. As the battle unfolded, several of Norfolk's soldiers were compelled to abandon the field, and even Norfolk himself lost one of his esteemed officers during this critical moment. Assessing the precarious situation of his forces, Richard called upon Northumberland for support. However, to Richard's dismay, Northumberland's contingent remained motionless, offering no assistance. Scholars have proposed different theories suggesting that Northumberland's refusal to aid his king was driven by personal motivation, or that the marsh obstructed his path to assist Richard's right flank. Regardless, Norfolk's division remained unsupported, highlighting a significant dysfunction within the Ricardian ranks. Meanwhile, the Stanleys kept their forces away from the engagement, their potential involvement threatening to tip the balance of the battle on either side. As the opposing forces swayed back and forth, a gap emerged between them and the marshy edges. It was at this moment that Richard spotted Henry's banners and seized the opportunity to crush this rebellious upstart once and for all. Recognizing that Henry's demise would likely lead to the disintegration of his army, Richard gathered his mounted companions and charged past the struggling vanguards, venturing out into the open. With nearly 200 fully armored cavalry thundering on their hooves, they closed in on the troops surrounding Henry. In a furious clash, Richard personally targeted Henry's standard-bearer, striking him down and ending his life. The battlefield descended into a chaotic melee, with Richard himself engaging in hand-to-hand combat, determined to bring down the rebel and secure victory. In contrast, Henry sought protection by dismounting and blending in among his own men, avoiding direct confrontation. Amidst the chaos, William Stanley seized the moment and engaged, but not on the side of the king, but that of Henry. Richard, now separated from his main force, found himself outnumbered and gradually pushed back several hundred yards away from Henry. Near the edge of the marsh, Richard's horse stumbled and fell. Undeterred by this setback, Richard gathered his remaining companions, vowing not to retreat. "God forbid that I retreat one step. I will either win the battle as king, or die as one." In a dramatic crescendo of the battle, King Richard, standing alone, fought valiantly amidst the sea of enemies. It is believed that he was ultimately struck down by a common foot soldier from the Stanley forces. With Richard's demise, his forces crumbled. Northumberland and his men fled north upon witnessing the king's fate, while Norfolk met his own end on the battlefield. Losses on the Ricardian side are not known, but Henry Tudor suffered minor casualties of about 100 to 200 men. Despite the meager scale of the actual conflict, the consequences of Bosworth were huge. After the smoke cleared, Richard's crown was discovered and brought to Henry. Atop Crown Hill in a nearby village, Henry was proclaimed the new king, marking the end of the Plantagenet era and the dawn of a new dynasty, the Tudors.